In the deep, cold stillness beyond the Enduran Rim, theft was routine. Ships came and went like drifting bones, stripped clean by pirates who called themselves traders. To most of the galaxy, stealing was just another skill, like navigation or lying. But one crew was about to discover the universe still kept score. They just didn't know the price yet. The Shadeclaw slid through the void on half power, its hull painted with the scars of plasma burns and near misses. Inside, the air tasted of oil and stale celebration. The Varan marauders had pulled another job from the edge of extinction, a human convoy ship, frozen and abandoned near the wrecked rim of old warfront space. 3 pods intact, growled Captain Rek, his golden scales reflecting the low light. Union buyers will pay plenty for these. Cryogenetics from a Deathworld, priceless. His lieutenant, a slender Saran, frowned as she examined the nearest pod. A sheen of frost glimmered under the flicker of weak cabin lights. Humans, she said quietly. The stories say they survived their own atmosphere trying to kill them. Stories, Rek interrupted, baring sharp teeth. Myths told to keep hatchlings polite. The Deathworld is dust now. Their soldiers are relics. Fragile ones, he tapped the pod's glass, amused at the unmoving figure inside. See? Perfectly harmless. But as the ship's engines hummed, a subtle pulse ran through the pod's readout. A rhythm, faint yet deliberate. Saran leaned closer. Captain, it's waking. A hiss split the silence. Steam curled from the edges of the cryo chamber as locks disengaged. The Varan crew stepped back, weapons drawn. Inside, frost cracked and fell away like shattered glass. The figure inside stirred, slow, human, alive. Then his eyes opened, gray, unblinking, cold as the space outside. The man gasped, pulling in air as if learning to breathe all over again. His hair was short, his face marked with pale scars that spoke of long wars. He looked at the aliens around him and, for one perfect second, seemed perfectly calm. Where? He asked softly. Am I? The words weren't loud, yet the tone made every weapon feel suddenly small. I'll ask the questions, Captain Rek snapped. Name, origin, rank. The man blinked, his breath steadying. Lieutenant Elias Ward, he said. Earth Defense Front. Last recorded mission, Outer Rim Convoy Escort. He looked around. This isn't Earth space. No, Rek said smugly. You're property of the Varan Empire now. You'll fetch a fine price, human. Elias's gaze swept the room, counting exits, distances, weapons, the faint vibration of engines. Every detail filed away in silence. Then almost absently he murmured, You should have left me frozen. Saran shifted uneasily. Captain, maybe we... Quiet, Rek hissed. He's bluffing. Elias tilted his head, listening. Somewhere deep within the Shadeclaw, a low hum changed pitch. The lights flickered. Do you hear that? He asked. Rek frowned. Hear what? The power grid, Elias said. I used to maintain them. Yours is... Unstable, Rek laughed. What could you possibly... The lights died. The emergency glow bathed the hold in red. Alarms wailed, consoles sparked, and the crew shouted over one another. The ship shuddered, systems failing in rapid sequence. Elias was already moving, calm, deliberate. He crossed the deck with the quiet precision of a man who'd spent half his life surviving chaos. Stop him, Rek bellowed, but Saran hesitated. There was something in Elias's eyes, not anger, but focus, the kind that made survival instinct whisper run. The human reached a control panel, his fingers dancing across alien keys with uncanny intuition. Sparks flew. The hum deepened. Then silence. Rek lunged. What have you done? Elias turned toward him, voice low, even. You kidnapped a soldier from the most hostile planet in the known galaxy. You woke him up inside an enemy ship. He paused. What did you think would happen? When power finally returned, only 2 heartbeats echoed through the ship. Saran, trembling, and Elias Ward standing by the viewport, eyes fixed on distant stars. She swallowed. They're all gone. He nodded once. They attacked. I defended. What happens now? She whispered. Elias didn't look at her. You'll send a distress beacon. Someone will come. Who? Earth, he said simply. Then quieter. And they'll bring everything. The beacon pulsed into the black, a single human code, long dormant, echoing across a galaxy that had forgotten fear. Far away, In the quiet command decks of Earth's outer defense network, the signal was received. A voice broke the silence. Sir, we found one of ours, and with that the war began again. The Shadeclaw drifted through the dead silence of space, its hull dimly lit by the faint pulse of a distress beacon. Inside, among the wreckage of its own ambition, Elias Ward stared out at the stars. For 2 days, he hadn't slept. Not because he couldn't. Humans could sleep through storms. But because the silence was louder than any battlefield. The bodies of the Varan crew had been sealed in the cargo bay. He'd said no words over them, but he'd looked at each face. Memorized it. He didn't hate them. They'd made a mistake, a fatal one. Now, only Saran remained. She sat across from him, hands bound loosely. Her thin voice cut through the hum of the beacon. You could have killed me too, she said quietly. Elias didn't look up. Could have. Why didn't you? He finally turned, gray eyes steady. Because you were afraid. That means you can learn. Saran looked down. Her claws trembled slightly against the metal cuffs. You destroyed your own ship's systems in minutes. How? Elias leaned back against the wall, eyes distant. You ever heard of Earth's oceans? No. They used to swallow ships whole. Entire fleets vanished because someone misjudged a storm. On Earth, we learned fast or we died. Our machines had to survive chaos, corrosion, pressure, and predators. We didn't build to last, we built to endure. He met her gaze. That's what we do, Saran, we endure. The beacon pinged again, its rhythm steady as a heartbeat. Elias closed his eyes, listening. Somewhere out there, someone had heard it. If the Earth Defense Fleet was still operational, they'd come. But if not, he was stranded in a galaxy that had already written humanity off as extinct. The thought didn't scare him. It only sharpened him. Saran broke the silence again. You think your kind will come for you? They always come, he said softly. It's what we're good at. And light years away, deep within the dark-laced nebula of Horizon Command, a signal flashed across a human command grid. Lieutenant Naomi Vega, on comms duty, blinked as a string of ancient code scrolled across her screen. Sir, incoming beacon. Priority encryption. Earth Defense Front pattern. Her commanding officer, Admiral Kepler, frowned. Impossible. That encryption was retired after the Frontier War. Sir, the origin matches the Andorran Rim. Kepler leaned closer, reading the data. That's hostile territory. He paused. Patch me through. A moment later, a faint static-filled voice echoed across the channel. Elias Ward's voice. Worn but steady. This is Lieutenant Elias Ward. Earth Defense Front, coordinates attached. I am not alone. Ship is disabled. Request extraction or orders. Vega's eyes widened. He's alive, Kepler's jaw tightened. He shouldn't be. That sector's been lost for years. He stared at the screen for a long moment, then said quietly, send the fleet, back on the Shadeclaw. Saran noticed Elias watching the beacon light fade and return. They heard you, didn't they? She asked. He didn't answer directly. If I were you, he said, I'd start praying to whatever gods you believe in. Saran's voice wavered. You think they'll kill me? Elias's tone softened slightly. They'll do what I tell them to. And what will you tell them? He hesitated, his gaze distant. That maybe. Not everyone out here deserves to burn. For a brief moment, silence settled between them, a fragile truce held by shared exhaustion. But the universe is never still for long. The sensors crackled. A new signal appeared, larger, closer. Saran's eyes widened. That's not human. Elias was already on his feet. Pirates? No, Union interceptors. He cursed softly under his breath. They must have tracked your beacon. How fast can you hide? Her eyes flicked to the storage ducts. Not fast enough, the hull shook. Blue light flared through the viewport as the Varan Union's fleet dropped from warp, a massive cruiser and 2 escorts. Their insignia glowed like burning serpents. Elias moved to the console, rerouting emergency systems. We're not fighting them. They'll vaporize us on sight, Saran hissed. Not if they think we're already dead, he replied, fingers flying across the interface. The ship's beacon dimmed, its signal scattering into static noise. Emergency stealth protocol, he muttered. Half your systems were junk, but humans are good with junk. The cruiser's scanners swept past, slow, suspicious. The shadeclaw floated cold and silent among drifting debris. Saran whispered, "They're leaving." Elias exhaled, shoulders relaxing slightly. "For now." Her voice softened. "You saved me again." He didn't answer. She looked at him for a long time, studying the lines of his face, the calm precision behind every word, every movement. "You don't act like the monsters the galaxy says you are." Elias finally looked at her, expression unreadable. "We aren't monsters, Saran. We just stopped pretending to be civilized when the universe stopped playing fair." Outside, the Varan cruiser turned and vanished into jump space. Inside, the human soldier sat in the wreck of an alien ship, watching the stars turn cold and quiet again. He whispered under his breath, "Come on, Earth, don't be too late." And light years away, the engines of the human fleet roared to life. The galaxy had forgotten what a human fleet looked like. For 2 centuries, after the collapse of the Deathworld Alliance, humanity had gone silent, withdrawn into its ruined homeworld, rebuilding under storms and ash while the rest of the cosmos grew complacent. Most thought Earth was a grave. But graves, as the Varan were about to learn, have a habit of remembering. Admiral Kepler stood on the bridge of the EDS Resolute, the flagship of the 3rd Expeditionary Armada. Before him, space shimmered with the ripple of warp tunnels. One by one, ships emerged, sleek, angular silhouettes etched in steel and determination. Dozens became hundreds, each bearing the same insignia, the blue and white crest of Earth Defense Command. Communications lit up. Signal confirmed. "Sir." "It's him, Lieutenant Elias Ward." Coordinates locked. The distress call originated inside Varan jurisdiction. Kepler's hands rested on the railing. His eyes were steady, though his voice carried the faint weight of disbelief. "I never thought I'd hear that name again." Ward was declared lost with the Atlas convoy. His adjutant, Captain Mirek, nodded. "The Varan don't take prisoners, sir. If he's alive, he's something they didn't expect." Kepler's gaze hardened. "Then let's remind the galaxy what happens when they underestimate us." Back aboard the crippled Shadeclaw, Elias and Saran watched the faint pulse of the beacon fade for the last time. The ship drifted through the static fields of the Enduran Rim, a lonely spark in a sea of emptiness. "How long until your fleet arrives?" Saran asked. "Soon," Elias said simply. "You'll hear them before you see them." She frowned. "Why?" He gave a small, humorless smile. "Because when humans come back from the dead, they make sure everyone notices." But hours passed in tense silence. Saran dozed lightly, her alien physiology recovering faster than human nerves could. Elias stayed awake, his thoughts looping in quiet precision. He had no illusions about what would happen when the fleet arrived. He'd be debriefed, interrogated, maybe even court-martialed. But none of that mattered. They'd heard him. Humanity wasn't extinct, they were still here. Then it came, the low, vibrating tremor of approaching warp drives. The viewport filled with light. Dozens of ships broke through the veil of space, their engines leaving streaks of white-blue fire. They arranged themselves with impossible precision, surrounding the Shadeclaw like a formation of silent hawks. Saran's voice caught. "There are so many." Elias smiled faintly. "That's just one armada." "Contact established," a voice crackled over the comms. "Lieutenant Ward, this is Admiral Kepler of the EDS Resolute. You are to identify yourself." Elias stepped to the console. "Sir, Elias Ward reporting. I'm aboard a disabled Varan vessel. One survivor, requesting asylum under Earth Command protection." There was a pause. Then Kepler's voice softened. "You're a long way from home, soldier?" "Yes, sir," Elias replied. "But I never stopped serving." On the bridge of the Resolute, Kepler studied the scans of the Shadeclaw. Minimal power, damaged hull, one human life form, one Varan signature. "No weapons active," Mirek frowned. "Why save an alien pirate?" Kepler didn't answer immediately. He'd seen enough war to know mercy wasn't a sign of weakness. He pressed the comm. "Bring them aboard." At the docking clamp sealed with a hollow clang, Elias guided Saran through the airlock, both flanked by Marines in dark armor. The corridor beyond was bright, clinical, and unnervingly quiet. As they entered the observation deck, every human present stopped talking. Some saluted. Others simply stared. To them, Elias Ward was a ghost from a lost war. Kepler stepped forward, hand outstretched. "Welcome home, Lieutenant." Elias shook his hand, voice steady. "Feels strange to hear that, sir." Kepler studied the Varan beside him. "And your companion?" Saran lowered her gaze. "I was part of the crew that took him." The Admiral's eyes hardened slightly. "Then why bring her here, Lieutenant?" "Because she chose to live," Elias said. "And because she knows what the Varan are planning." That got everyone's attention. Yet in the command chamber, Saran revealed what she knew. A Varan Union directive to harvest human cryo-soldiers for genetic trade. Hundreds of frozen humans, lost transport ships, colonies gone dark were being sold in secret across the galaxy. "They're not just stealing bodies," Elias said grimly. "They're trying to copy us, build soldiers that can endure like humans but without the conscience." Kepler's jaw tightened. "They want our resilience, our instinct to survive." "Yes," Elias said softly, "but they'll never understand that our strength isn't in our DNA, it's in what we stand for when everything's burning." The room fell, silent. Finally, Kepler spoke. "You said they're harvesting our kind. Do you know where?" Elias nodded slowly. "Coordinates are in the Shadeclaw's core memory. If we move fast, we can get to them before the Varan fleet scatters." Kepler turned to his bridge officers. "Signal all ships. Set course for the Enduran core line. We're going hunting." As the human fleet began its synchronized turn, the stars rippled with their movement. Engines flared to life, glowing like the eyes of a sleeping god awakening after too long. Saran watched from the viewport, awe etched across her face. "You're really going to fight the Varan Union? Alone?" Elias looked at her, calm and resolute. "We don't do alone anymore." And as the Resolute leapt into warp, the galaxy trembled, for the first time in centuries. Humanity was marching back into the dark. The Enduran core line was not a place for the faint of heart. Its systems were dense with radiation storms, drifting debris, and the silent graveyards of fleets long forgotten. For centuries, the galaxy had ignored these stars. That neglect had allowed the Varan to thrive in secrecy. Elias Ward stared at the stars from the bridge of the Resolute, his gray eyes hard and calm. The coordinates from the Shadeclaw's core were clear. One system, one planet, a human prison of frozen soldiers. Saran hovered beside him, hands crossed, struggling to contain both awe and fear. "I never imagined. So many humans," she whispered. "They're alive," Elias said softly. "Even in cryo, they survive. That's what makes them dangerous." The fleet approached Ariath Prime, a barren world of jagged mountains and gray skies, where Varan Union outposts glimmered like dark jewels in the shadowed continents. Scanners revealed dozens of ships in orbit, and more on the surface, security drones, transport vessels, even automated harvest facilities. The humans' genetic bounty had become a full-scale operation. Kepler's voice rang over the comms. "Ward, can your squad breach the surface?" "Yes, sir," Elias said. "But we need a landing corridor. I can't risk these people in the middle of a bombardment." Saran's claws tapped against the console. "You're going in alone?" Elias gave her a faint smile. "Not alone. The fleet covers extraction. I just need to reach the cryo vaults." The Resolute and its fleet formed a shadowed blockade in orbit. Below, Ariath Prime's surface was a hive of Varan activity. Security drones patrolled corridors between frozen monoliths of machinery, and automated harvesters moved like metallic insects across the plains. Elias and a small strike team teleported down. The air was thin, bitter, tinged with ozone. He moved with a soldier's precision, every step measured, every scan deliberate. Saran followed, her alien senses alert, noting every patrol and turret. "This place is worse than I imagined," she muttered. Elias didn't respond. His thoughts were elsewhere. Memories flickered of training, of convoys lost to ambushes, of comrades frozen and forgotten. Each face haunted him. Every life stolen by the Varan felt personal now. They reached the vaults. Dozens of cryopods hummed in perfect silence, lined like soldiers awaiting a commander's return. Elias's breath caught. "Every pod has a story," he whispered almost reverently. "Every human? Someone loved them. Someone counted on them to survive." Saran's voice shook. "And they took them all." Yes, Elias said. And they thought we wouldn't notice. They thought humanity would vanish quietly. He set to work on the locks, circuits humming under his skilled fingers. Even a century of technology could not match the intuition of a soldier trained for survival against impossible odds. Each pod released with a hiss, and one by one humanity began to stir. A sudden alarm cut through the quiet. The Varan Union had noticed the intrusion. Overhead, ships broke from orbit, laser cannons igniting the sky, automated defense grids activated. Elias didn't flinch. "Get them out," he ordered the strike team. He moved toward the last vault, his own heart pounding with the weight of responsibility. Seiran tried to protest. "You're going to—" "I know what I'm doing," he said. The final pod opened. Inside, a man blinked at the harsh light. "Lieutenant Elias Ward?" He rasped. You're alive," Elias offered his hand. "Get up. We're going home." As the strike team escorted the thawing humans, alarms screamed. The sky above was filled with Varan fighters, and the ground rumbled beneath automated harvesters. Elias signaled the fleet. The Resolute unleashed a controlled assault, precision strikes to disable turrets, shielded landing zones for extraction, and cover for the humans. Seiran, watching the humans step out into the open, whispered, They really survive everything, don't they?" Elias's gaze was hard yet calm. "Not because they're indestructible," he said, voice low, almost a lesson. "Because humans fight when they have no choice. Because we endure when the universe wants us gone. That's what makes us dangerous." The Varan attempted to respond with everything they had, but the human fleet moved like a tide, coordinated, unstoppable. Their ships cut through defenses with precision, their firepower controlled, measured, yet devastating. The harvesters fell, the outposts fell, and the frozen soldiers were finally free. Elias stood amidst them, heart heavy. "We saved them," he said softly. "But the universe hasn't forgotten yet. It will come after us." "They always do." Seiran looked at him, finally understanding. "You don't just survive," she said. "You make everyone else survive with you." Elias allowed himself a brief nod. "That's what it means to be human. Not just to fight, but to fight for others." Above, the stars shone cold and distant, but on Ariath Prime the survivors began walking toward the human fleet. They were no longer prisoners, no longer cargo. They were humanity returned, and the galaxy would tremble because of it. Ariath Prime receded behind them, a gray-scarred world now emptied of its stolen souls. The human fleet moved in disciplined formation, its engines leaving streaks of pale blue fire across the dark void. The freed humans were aboard the transport ships, waking fully from decades of frozen silence, blinking at the light of stars they had never expected to see again. And somewhere in that quiet fleet, Elias Ward felt the first taste of something long forgotten: hope. But hope, he knew, was always dangerous. Admiral Kepler's voice came over the comms. "Coordinates for the Varan Union fleet have been confirmed. They're at the Void Gate, fortified, shielded, and heavily armed." Elias ran a hand over his face, the lines of past battles etched deep in his gray eyes. "They've been waiting for us," he murmured. They knew someone would follow the beacon. "They've prepared everything." Seiran beside him glanced at the bridge. "Are you saying they expect a trap?" Elias nodded. "Exactly. And that's why we hit them on our terms. The moment they see us coming, panic will spread. Humans know how to survive chaos better than anyone. That's what they won't anticipate. They're expecting to crush soldiers, not spark a storm." The Void Gate hung in the darkness like a black wound in space, a nexus of energy where interstellar travel intersected. Varan warships clustered there, shields glowing red against the cold void, weapons trained outward, awaiting intruders. Elias reviewed the fleet's formations. "We won't approach head-on," he said. "We'll split. Half our fleet draws them into a false corridor. The rest will flank and disable the gate controls. Once that happens, their reinforcements will be trapped outside. Then we take everything back." Kepler's tone was calm, precise. "And the humans you rescued?" "They'll fight," Elias said simply. "They have waited too long to be used and forgotten. This is their first chance to strike back." And the first skirmish was sudden. The Varan fired without hesitation, plasma trails slicing through the darkness. For a moment, chaos reigned. But humans had a rhythm the galaxy had forgotten. Ships moved in coordinated arcs, weaving through fire like living predators. Shields flared, cannons responded, and the initial volley shattered against tactics no automated system could predict. Saran's eyes widened. "They're incredible," she whispered. Elias glanced at her. "They survived Deathworld. They survived the collapse. Nothing in this galaxy has ever faced humans before. Not like this." The flanking maneuver began. The second half of the fleet surged from behind an asteroid cluster, striking the Void Gate's outer defense array. Energy shields flickered under precise volleys. Automated cannons exploded. The Varens' response was frantic, uncoordinated, chaos where they expected dominance. On the bridge of the Resolute, Elias guided the strike. "Target the gate controls! Do not destroy the ships unless they fire at civilians. Keep them alive, we need them for intelligence." Saran, still by his side, muttered, "You really are trying to win without killing everyone." Elias allowed a faint grin. Humans fight to survive. Sometimes letting the enemy live reminds them how weak they really are. Then came the critical moment. The gate's energy matrix began to overload. Red alarms screamed as the Varen realized the flank had trapped their reinforcements. From orbit, the newly freed humans began launching boarding pods. Soldiers thawed only hours earlier were already fighting with lethal precision, disabling ships and seizing controls. Elias watched as they moved, silent, disciplined, unyielding. They were human and they were dangerous, Saran whispered almost in awe. "They really are unstoppable, aren't they?" Elias's gray eyes burned with quiet certainty. "They're not unstoppable. They're human. That's something worse." And the Void Gate began to collapse under controlled detonation. Light rippled across the void, and the Varen fleet, once confident, now scrambled like prey cornered by predators. Kepler's voice boomed. "Gate destabilized. Extraction complete. Return to formation." Elias exhaled, shoulders relaxing slightly. For the first time in years, he allowed himself a small measure of satisfaction. "This is just the beginning," he murmured. Saran looked at him, eyes wide, trying to grasp what she'd witnessed. "You didn't just win, Elias. You reminded them all what humans are." He gave a grim nod. "They'll remember it. And next time, they'll think twice." Yeah, the stars stretched ahead, cold and infinite. Yet within that darkness, a new force stirred, a human fleet alive again, prepared to defend what was theirs. And somewhere deep in the galaxy, the Varen Union would feel it, because theft may have been a minor crime before. But robbing a human from the Deathworld, that was a declaration of war, and humanity had finally returned to collect. Elias Ward stood at the prow of the Resolute, staring into the swirling maelstrom of Varen space. He could feel it in his bones, the way the stars seemed to tense, the way the void itself waited. This wasn't just another mission. This was a reckoning. The Varen Union had been bold. Too bold. They had stolen humans from the Deathworld, kept them in cryo prisons, and tried to exploit what they could never understand. Human endurance, human instinct, human spirit. Elias had seen their ships, their facilities, their weapons. He had seen the damage they were willing to inflict to claim profit. Now it was time to teach them a lesson they could not forget. "Admiral Kepler," Elias said, voice calm but sharp, "we need to hit their command nexus directly. This is where their fleet is coordinated, where their strategy originates. Take it out, and the rest will crumble." Kepler nodded. "Coordinates locked, but it's heavily defended. If we push too fast." Elias raised a hand. "If we wait, they'll scatter and rebuild. We don't chase shadows. We end the hunt." The fleet moved like a storm, cutting through Varen lines with precision. The Resolute led the charge, flanked by the ships piloted by humans thawed from decades in cryosleep. Each one had survived Deathworld, trained for conditions no alien species could endure. And now they were soldiers in their own right, sharp, fearless, and relentless. Saran floated beside him in the observation deck, her alien eyes wide with awe. "They're incredible. I've never seen such coordination." Elias's gray eyes were steady. "They're not just fighting with weapons," he said. "They're fighting with instinct, with memory, with the knowledge that this universe underestimated them for too long. The command nexus loomed ahead, a fortress of black alloys and red shields, orbiting a dying star. Every sensor, turret, and gun emplacement had been designed to deter fleets, to crush intruders before they reached the inner sanctum. But Elias had a plan. "Split formation," he instructed. 2 waves to draw fire. 1 stealth insertion. The moment the shields dip, we hit the core. "Saran, you're with me." Saran's jaw tightened. "You're insane." "Perhaps," Elias said softly. "But the galaxy taught me that insanity is just survival pushed to the edge." The first wave engaged. Explosions lit the void as plasma slammed into hulls, weapons fired, and ships maneuvered with deadly precision. The Varen fought back with everything they had, but humans were not ordinary prey. They moved unpredictably, striking where the enemy expected weakness, exploiting every flaw, turning chaos into opportunity. Elias led the second wave into the shadows of asteroid fields, using debris to mask their advance. When they arrived at the Nexus, automated defenses scanned and failed. He bypassed them with skill honed over years of combat, human instinct in its purest form. Inside the command nexus, the Varen were panicked. Screens flashed warnings. Turrets tried to track the infiltration team. But humans, even those recently freed from cryo, were faster, smarter, and more lethal than anything the Union had encountered. Saran gasped as she watched Elias disable a control node. "One human. He's destroying everything." Elias glanced back. "Not just me, all of us. Humanity isn't a single soldier. It's every mind, every instinct, every person who refuses to be broken. And that's why we win." The Nexus's core chamber glowed red as the humans approached. The central control node held the intelligence of the Varen Union fleet. Plans, deployments, everything. Elias planted the charges himself, his fingers steady, heart beating in quiet determination. "This ends now," he muttered. Saran watched him, amazed. You've been through everything, and you're still standing. How?" He looked at her, expression calm but unyielding. "Because Deathworld doesn't kill what it can't break. Humans endure. That's all it takes to turn the tide." The charges detonated in a controlled sequence. Red energy flared. Shields collapsed. Communications were severed. The Varen fleet in orbit and across nearby systems was cut off, paralyzed by the sudden collapse of its command. In the silence that followed, Elias stepped back, watching the stars through the viewport. Saran whispered, almost in awe. "You've destroyed them," he nodded. "Not destroyed. Woken them up to the consequences of underestimating humans." Outside, the galaxy was quiet, but it would not forget, because theft had always been minor, until they robbed a human from the Deathworld, and now, humanity had returned. The void was silent after the explosion. The Varen Union's command nexus was gone, its fleet scattered, crippled, and leaderless. Yet the human fleet did not slow. They pressed forward, not out of vengeance, but out of purpose. Elias Ward stood on the bridge of the Resolute, gray eyes scanning the dark horizon. Every movement of the fleet was deliberate, every signal precise. Behind him, Saran watched the human soldiers she had once feared now move with quiet authority, guiding the fleet through the remnants of the shattered enemy. "They underestimated us," she whispered. Elias nodded. "They thought stealing a human was harmless, that we were weak, fragile, easy to control." His gaze hardened. "They were wrong. Humanity always survives, and when we survive, we fight." In the fleet approached the central systems of the Varen Union, once proud worlds now trembling under the shadow of human resolve. Elias addressed the assembled crew over the comms. "We've come for a message," he said. "Not for blood, not for revenge, not for conquest. We've come to warn the galaxy." He paused, letting the weight of his words settle. "Do not take humans for granted. Do not think our history is weakness, our planet a grave, or our people extinct. You may think of us as soft, expendable, easy prey. You are wrong. We endure, we rise, we fight, and we do not forget." On the ground, Saran led a squad of Varen prisoners out of the ruins. They were bewildered, shaking, realizing the humans who had once been prey were now teachers of a lesson they would never forget. "Human soldiers," one whispered. They survived everything we thought would break them." Saran looked at Elias, standing tall on the bridge, voice calm yet commanding. "It's not just strength," she said, realization dawning. "It's spirit. It's impossible to destroy that, Elias nodded. Exactly. Humans survive not because of armor or weapons, but because of will. Every challenge, every death, every betrayal, they endure it. That's why they cannot be stolen or broken or ignored. The galaxy had watched for centuries, believing humanity dead. A faded memory. Now every system along the Anduran core line knew otherwise. Fleets and governments would spread word of what had occurred, and stories of Lieutenant Elias Ward and the human fleet would ripple through space like a storm. From the observation deck, Elias watched the stars stretch ahead. He could feel the weight of the lives he had saved, of the soldiers thawed from cryo, of the worlds that would now tremble before the truth of humanity's resilience. Saran approached, quietly. Do you think they'll ever understand? Elias considered. They will, in time. But understanding isn't immediate. They'll learn slowly, through caution, fear, and respect. Humanity survives because it refuses to be ignored, and once the universe sees it, it can never forget. The last Varan stronghold fell without a fight. The human fleet moved with precision, disabling weapons, severing communications, and leaving the enemy alive enough to remember what had happened. Elias turned to his crew, a soft smile breaking his usually stern demeanor. This is not the end of the war, he said. It's the beginning of awareness. Humanity is here and we are not prey. We are the spark that reminds. The galaxy's survival has a cost, and that cost is never forgotten. In orbit above the final defeated planet, the soldiers he had rescued, once frozen, once stolen, stood in formation. They were not afraid. They were not weak. They were human. Elias addressed them quietly so only they could hear. You survived because you had to. You survived because someone refused to let you die. You survived because you are human. Remember that. Carry it wherever you go. Fight for your life, your people, and your world. And when the galaxy takes too much, remind it who it underestimated. A faint cheer rose among the soldiers, but Elias did not smile widely. He knew the galaxy was a harsh place and humanity's road was far from easy. But for the first time in centuries, it was theirs to walk unbroken. Saran approached one final time, her eyes reflecting the stars. You've changed the galaxy, Elias. Not just by fighting, but by showing them what humans really are. He looked at her, gray eyes steady and calm, yet burning with quiet intensity. No, he said. The galaxy changed itself the moment it stole from a human from the Deathworld. We didn't start the war. We reminded them of the cost. Above them, the stars stretched endlessly, cold and indifferent. But the galaxy would never look at humans the same way again. For centuries, theft had been a minor crime. But robbing a human from the Deathworld? That was a warning, and humanity had delivered it.